They said, "No bonus this year," while gifting a $12,000 espresso machine to our VP. So I dug up a little email, the one that kicked off a $90 million lawsuit. You see, when HR tells you the company's tightening its belt, maybe check if they're doing it with Hermes leather, because I did. And what I found in those deleted drafts and doctored compliance reports, let's just say it made my missing bonus look like pocket change compared to what they were about to lose. My name is Tara Monroe, and after 13 years of keeping Virionics Labs out of regulatory hell, I thought I'd earned more than a patronizing smile from HR. The conference room on the 32nd floor still smelled like fresh paint and ambition that December afternoon. Outside, Denver's skyline glittered with early snow, but inside, the atmosphere was anything but festive. I sat across from Bethany, our head of HR, watching her perfectly manicured fingers tap against her iPad as she delivered the news. "I know this isn't what you were hoping to hear, Tara," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured empathy. "But given the current market conditions and our need to streamline operations, we've had to make some difficult decisions about year-end bonuses." I kept my expression neutral, a skill I'd perfected over years of compliance work. "I see, and this applies to everyone. It's a company-wide initiative." The lie rolled off her tongue as smoothly as her signature red lipstick. "We're all making sacrifices." That same week, I watched facilities wheel in a La Marzocco Strada espresso machine retail price $12,000 into Vice President Richard Hawley's corner office. The invoice, carelessly left on the copy machine, listed it as essential office equipment. Essential. Like my mortgage payment wasn't. But it wasn't just the coffee machine. Walking past the marketing department, I overheard excited chatter about the team appreciation trip to the Maldives. 5 members, 7 days, business class flights. The spreadsheet I glimpsed on someone's screen showed a $50,000 budget line item marked Q4 team building. I'd saved this company from 3 major HIPAA violations in the past year alone. My reports had prevented what our legal team quietly estimated as $40 million in potential fines. But apparently, that wasn't worth a fraction of what they spent on Italian coffee and tropical vacations. Back at my desk, I pulled up my employment file. 13 years. Not a single performance review below exceeds expectations. My compliance framework had become the industry standard. Copied by 3 of our competitors, I'd built something here. Brick by careful brick. The email from Bethany arrived at 4:37 p.m., like she'd waited until just before end of day to avoid follow-up questions. As discussed, please find attached information about this year's compensation adjustments. We appreciate your understanding and continued dedication to Virionics Labs. Attached was a generic PDF about navigating challenging economic times and shared sacrifice for future growth. Corporate gaslighting at its finest. I didn't slam doors. I didn't send angry emails. I didn't even update my LinkedIn status. Instead, I created a new folder on my personal drive. I named it simply Documentation. Because if there's one thing 13 years in compliance teaches you, it's that the most dangerous response isn't anger, it's patience armed with evidence. That night, as I sat in my home office with a glass of wine, I stared at the awards on my wall. Compliance Professional of the Year. Excellence in Risk Management. Pretty pieces of acrylic that apparently meant less than a good cappuccino foam. They thought they could erase my value with a meeting and a form letter. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion. In compliance, we have a saying, document everything, trust nothing. I was about to show them why. The pattern started subtly, like a shadow creeping across a wall. First, it was the Monday morning compliance meetings I'd been running for 5 years. The calendar invite for January 8th arrived without my name. Restructuring for efficiency, the email said. Miles Randall would be taking the lead. Miles Randall, the same director who'd asked me last quarter if compliance was, like, part of IT or something. The man who thought HIPAA was pronounced hippo, until I corrected him in front of the board. I showed up anyway that first Monday, coffee in hand, ready to support the transition. Miles fumbled through my carefully crafted agenda, mispronouncing regulatory framework and confusing FDA guidelines with FTC regulations. The team exchanged glances. I sat silent, taking notes. By February, my name had vanished from the quarterly compliance report I'd authored. 37 pages of risk assessment, mitigation strategies, and regulatory updates all submitted under Miles Randall, Director of Compliance Excellence. Excellence. He couldn't even spell mitigation without spell check. "Oh, Tara," he said when I asked about it, that practiced confusion clouding his face. "I thought you knew. Leadership wants a more streamlined reporting structure. Don't worry, your work is still valued." Valued, like a ghostwriter, like furniture. The erasure accelerated. The compliance framework I developed, the Monroe Method, as my team had unofficially called it, became the Randall Regulatory System in the new company presentations. My login credentials for the regulatory database were mysteriously downgraded. "Technical glitch," it assured me. "We'll look into it." They never did. The breaking point came in March. I discovered my risk analysis for the Houston merger had been revised, not edited, gutted. Every red flag I'd raised about their data handling procedures, every concern about their clinical trial documentation, sanitized into corporate speak that said nothing and protected no one. I found the original in my sent items, dated February 28, 2:03 p.m. Critical compliance gaps identified in target company's data governance. Recommend immediate remediation before proceeding. Clear, direct, necessary. The version submitted to legal, dated March 2nd, 4:47 p.m. Minor procedural differences noted. Standard integration protocols should address during post-merger alignment. They'd turned a fire alarm into a gentle suggestion. I started documenting everything: screenshots, email forwards to my personal account, meeting recordings when legal, the Thursday afternoon when Miles presented my HIPAA audit findings as his own initiative. I sat in the back row, phone recording under my notepad. Evidence, always evidence. The Slack messages were particularly damning. Miles to the legal team. "Tara's being a bit alarmist about Houston. Let me smooth things over." Followed by, "We need this deal." Sometimes compliance needs to learn to play ball. Play ball, with federal regulations, with patient data, with the kind of violations that destroy companies. They pulled me from the merger task force in April. "Reallocating resources," Bethany explained. That same practice smile from December. "We need you focused on routine audits." Routine audits. After 13 years of strategic planning, after building their entire compliance infrastructure, routine audits. But I smiled, I nodded. I accepted my new desk moved from the executive floor to the 15th, tucked between the copy room and the server closet that hummed too loud. I organized my routine audits with meticulous care. And I kept documenting, because they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd forgotten that in compliance, we see everything, every email, every revision, every deleted file that leaves a digital footprint. They thought they could erase me. They had no idea they were building my case. The paper trail became my obsession, my salvation, my weapon. Every night after the office emptied, I'd stay behind in my 15th floor exile, methodically building my archive. The hum of the server closet became my white noise as I worked. Email threads, Slack conversations, document revision histories, SharePoint logs that showed who accessed what, when, and what changes they made. The digital breadcrumbs they'd carelessly scattered, thinking no one would bother to follow them. I organized everything into folders with clinical precision. Original reports, altered versions, meeting minutes, actual versus, filed. Risk assessment suppressed. Each file time-stamped, checksummed, backed up in triplicate across encrypted drives. The patterns emerged like a photograph developing in solution. Every report I'd written warning about compliance gaps had been systematically neutered. Every recommendation that might slow the Houston merger had been deleted or rewritten. My name stripped from documents. My warnings transformed into endorsements. May 17th, 11:43 p.m. I found the smoking gun I didn't know I was looking for. An email thread between Miles and someone named Bradley Chen from Houston's acquisition team. My eyes stopped at one line. Monroe's risk assessment could kill this deal. Need to handle. Handle. Like I was a problem to be managed, not a professional doing her job. The response from Miles, sent at 2:18 a.m. Already in progress. New version will be merger-friendly. She won't be involved in final review. Merger-friendly. They'd invented a new category of compliance, whatever made the deal happen. I started tracking the changes more carefully. A risk matrix I'd marked as critical immediate action required became moderate address post-integration. Patient data vulnerabilities I'd flagged transformed into opportunities for system harmonization. The Microsoft Word comparison tool became my best friend. Original versus final. Truth versus fiction. My warnings versus their whitewashing. Each alteration meticulously cataloged. Each deletion preserved. June brought new discoveries. They'd created an entire parallel communication channel, a private Slack workspace I wasn't supposed to know about. But Randall, brilliant as always, had screenshot a conversation and accidentally included it in a larger document. One corner of the image showed the channel name, Houston Fast Track. I spent 3 days piecing together fragments, matching timestamps with official communications. They were running 2 versions of reality, one for the record, one for the truth, and I had proof of both. The metadata told stories they thought were invisible. A compliance report showing last modified by Miles Randall at 4:56 p.m., when I had emails proving he was in a client dinner in Boulder at that exact time. Someone was logging in as him, making changes, covering tracks, sloppy tracks. I created a master timeline, cross-referencing every document, every change, every lie, color-coded, hyperlinked, searchable, litigation-ready, though I didn't fully admit that to myself yet. My personal favorite was a track changes comment that someone forgot to delete before sending to legal. On my warning about Houston's data retention policies, someone the metadata said Bradley Chen had written, "Monroe being paranoid again, delete this section." Paranoid. About federal regulations. About 9-figure fines. About patient privacy violations that could destroy lives and livelihoods. By late June, my archive had grown to 47 gigabytes, compressed, encrypted, stored on 3 separate drives, one in my bank safety deposit box, one at home, one in a place they'd never think to look. I maintained my routine, smiled in hallways, submitted my sanitized reports on time, attended the meetings they still invited me to, sitting quietly while they discussed my work as if I weren't there, the invisible woman, documenting her own erasure. They thought they were burying me. They were actually building my fortress. Every night, I'd add to the archive, every slight, every alteration, every lie carefully preserved. They'd created a paper trail all right, just not the one they intended. The hunter had become the archivist, and my collection was almost complete. The smoking gun arrived wrapped in bureaucracy, hidden in a routine email from legal. July 11th, 3:22 p.m. Subject line: October Compliance Report. Final version for Houston review. October Compliance Report. My fingers froze over the keyboard. I hadn't submitted any October report for Houston. I'd been removed from the merger team in April. I opened the attachment with the careful precision of a bomb technician. 23 pages, my template, my methodology, my risk assessment framework, but not my words. Where I had written, "System integration poses significant HIPAA vulnerabilities requiring immediate remediation." This version read, "System integration offers opportunities for enhanced data management," where I documented critical patient data encryption protocols incompatible breach risk elevated. It now stated, "Minor technical variations in encryption standards easily harmonized post-merger." They'd taken my skeleton and dressed it in lies. But the metadata. God bless lazy IT departments told the real story. Creation date, October 3rd, 9:14 a.m. Author Tara Monroe. Last modified October 9th, 11:57 p.m. Modified by Legal Temp Account 03. I cross-referenced with my calendar. October 3rd. I'd been in mandatory diversity training from 8:30 a.m. to noon. Physically impossible for me to create a document at 9:14. Someone had used my credentials. The search began. I pulled every document tagged with my name from October. 4 reports. 17 assessments, all created when I was provably elsewhere in meetings, at conferences, once when I was documented as being home with flu. Then I found the thread that unraveled everything. Buried in the IT help desk tickets, a system I still had read access to, was a request from Miles Randall, September 28th, 4:41 p.m. Need password reset for T. Monroe compliance account. Out sick. Urgent Houston deliverables. The response from IT. Completed. Temporary password. Welcome 123. Please have user change upon return. They never told me. Never asked me to change it. They'd been logging in as me for months. I pulled the access logs. Someone had been signing into my account from IP addresses I didn't recognize, at hours when I was asleep. 2:47 a.m., 3:33 a.m., 4:19 a.m. The ghost shifts, when they thought no one was watching. Every document they'd created under my name went into a new folder, forgeries. Each one compared against my actual work, my actual writing style, my actual risk assessments. The differences were stark to anyone who knew my work. Conservative became permissive, warnings became welcomes, red flags became green lights. The October report was the worst. They'd included an executive summary I'd never write. Houston's data management practices align well with Virionic standards. Minimal integration risks identified. Minimal. I'd identified 47 critical vulnerabilities in my real assessment. 47 ways patient data could be compromised. 47 lawsuits waiting to happen. I found the original My Real October assessment in my draft folder. Untouched since I'd been removed from the project. Side by side. The two documents looked like before and after photos of reality. Truth and its cosmetic surgery. The kicker came when I checked the distribution list. The forged report had gone to Houston's board, their legal team, their compliance officers, all seeing my name, all believing I'd signed off on this fiction. My professional reputation stamped on a document that violated every principle I'd spent 13 years upholding. They weren't just erasing me, they were rewriting me, creating a paper trail Tara who bent rules, who overlooked risks, who played ball. A Tara who would take the fall when the integration inevitably failed and regulators came knocking. I printed everything, real reports on the left, forgeries on the right. The contrast was damning, but I needed more. I needed the why. The answer came in fragments. Budget projections showing the merger's value, $90 million. Completion bonuses for executives 7 figures each. Stock options vesting schedules accelerated by 2 years if the deal closed by year-end. 90 million reasons to silence a compliance officer. 90 million reasons to forge documents. 90 million reasons to make me disappear. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by evidence, and felt the cold clarity of purpose. They'd made me a ghost in my own career. Time to show them what ghosts could do. I opened a new folder on my encrypted drive, named it simply Lawsuit Evidence. The hunt was over. The haunting was about to begin. The forged signature changed everything. July 25th, 4:38 p.m. An email from accounting about a documentation update for the Houston merger files. Attached a certificate of compliance verification. My name typed at the bottom. My digital signature perfectly placed. Except I'd been in Denver General Hospital that day, getting my appendix removed. I stared at the document on my laptop screen, ice flooding my veins. Not just my typed name, my actual cryptographic signature, the one linked to my secure credentials, legally binding, traceable to my professional license. They'd used it to certify a data security assessment I'd never seen, for systems I'd never reviewed, claiming protections that didn't exist. The hospital records were my alibi. Admitted at 6:42 a.m., surgery at 9:15 a.m., discharged the next day at 2 p.m., pain medication logs, nursing notes. Meanwhile, according to this document, I was apparently conducting comprehensive security audits and signing federal compliance attestations. I dove into my signature logs, a feature most people didn't know existed. Every time a digital signature was used, it created a record: time, date, IP address, document hash, the forensic breadcrumbs of identity theft. 23 unauthorized uses since May. 23 documents I'd never seen, never reviewed, never approved. Each one pushing the Houston merger forward. Each one accepting liability I'd never agreed to shoulder. The technical explanation came together like a diagnosis. That old account they'd claimed couldn't be deactivated due to system dependencies. The one IT said they'd restricted but never actually disabled. Someone had been using it to access my signature certificate, stored on the company's document management server. the signature on the merger's final compliance package. The one blessing Houston's catastrophically inadequate data protection was mine. If the FDA investigated, if patients were compromised, if the $90 million deal imploded, guess whose signature was all over the approval documents? I pulled the metadata from every forged signature. Same IP range, same access pattern, same late-night timestamps, 2:33 a.m., 3:41 a.m., 4:27 a.m., the vampire shift. When compliant officers were supposed to be sleeping, not signing away their careers, my hands shook as I opened the signature certificate details. Last accessed July 24th, 11:49 p.m., while I was lying in a hospital bed, counting ceiling tiles and waiting for surgery. Someone was using my professional identity to commit fraud. The USB drive on my keychain, military-grade encryption, biometric lock, suddenly felt like it weighed 50 pounds. I'd named it insurance months ago, thinking I was protecting myself from being erased. I hadn't imagined they'd steal my identity to rewrite reality. I created a new subfolder. Identity theft federal crime. Started organizing the evidence. Real signatures versus forged. My actual locations versus when documents were signed. The hospital records. The surgery reports. The impossibility of being in two places at once. Then I found the masterpiece of their deception. A risk acceptance letter, signed with my certificate, explicitly waiving concerns about Houston's patient data architecture. Dated July 20th when I was in pre-operative consultations, the letter didn't just approve the merger, it enthusiastically endorsed every shortcuts, every vulnerability, every disaster waiting to happen. After thorough review, I, Tara Monroe, certify that all identified risks have been adequately addressed or accepted with appropriate mitigation strategies in place. Mitigation strategies. For systems that stored unencrypted patient data. For protocols that violated 6 different federal regulations. For a merger that was a class action lawsuit wrapped in paperwork. They'd made me the architect of my own professional destruction. When this house of cards collapsed, and it would collapse, every forged document would point to me. The compliance officer who went rogue, who ignored her own warnings, who signed off on disaster for reasons investigators would have to guess at. Bribery and competence. Breakdown. I copied everything to my encrypted drives. 3 copies, 3 locations. Then I did something I'd never done before. I called my lawyer. Not the company lawyer, my lawyer. The one who'd handled my apartment purchase, who'd seemed bored with real estate closings. Hypothetically, I said, if someone forged federal compliance documents using a stolen digital signature, what kind of crime would that be? The pause was long. Hypothetically, we're talking wire fraud, identity theft, possibly RICO if it's part of a pattern. Why do you ask? I looked at my USB drive, glowing red in the lamplight. Just curious about compliance scenarios. But I wasn't curious. I was building a bomb shelter. Because when you discover they forged your signature on a $90 million lie, you don't get angry. You get evidence, then you get even. The email from Houston's audit team arrived August 3rd, 9:14 a.m. Subject line, Compliance Documentation Review, Urgent Response Required. Ms. Monroe, as the certifying compliance officer for the Virionics Houston merger, we need you to provide the original assessment documents referenced in your July reports. Our independent review has identified several areas requiring clarification. My coffee mug stopped halfway to my lips. Independent review. The 2 words that could unravel everything. I read their list of requested documents. Every single one had been forged with my signature. Every assessment they wanted to verify was fiction wearing my name. They expected me to defend lies I'd never told, to explain reports I'd never written, to stand behind decisions that violated everything I'd spent 13 years protecting. The cursor blinked in the reply field. One click could expose everything. One forwarded email chain could detonate their $90 million house of cards. I typed slowly, deliberately. Thank you for your diligence in reviewing these critical compliance matters. I'm forwarding the requested documentation, including all original assessments and supporting materials. Then I attached everything. Not the forgeries, the originals. My real risk assessments. Bleeding red with warnings. The unedited reports documenting Houston's HIPAA violations. The patient data vulnerabilities, the regulatory nightmares, 47 critical failures they'd tried to bury under my stolen signature. But I didn't stop there. I included the email chains, Miles asking for my password, the IT ticket, the access logs showing someone signing in as me at 3:41 a.m., the hospital records proving I was in surgery when documents were being signed, the complete forensic trail of identity theft and fraud. Please note, I continued typing, there appear to be multiple versions of these documents in circulation. I've included metadata analysis showing the discrepancies. The attached materials represent my actual assessments. Any documents suggesting I approve the current integration plan without addressing these critical issues should be considered suspect. My finger hovered over send. Once this left my outbox, there was no stopping what would follow. Houston's lawyers would dissect every document. Their board would demand answers. The merger would freeze. Investigations would begin. I clicked send at 9:37 a.m. The response came faster than expected. 12:42 p.m. Not from their audit team, from their chief legal officer. Ms. Monroe, we need to discuss these documents immediately. Are you available for a video conference at 2 p.m. Eastern? I sat in my cramped 15th floor office, server room humming its white noise, and watched their faces change as I walked them through the evidence. Their lead attorney, a woman who looked like she ate corporate raiders for breakfast, took notes that gradually transformed from skeptical to alarmed. You're saying you never signed these approval documents? I was under general anesthesia when that one was signed, I said, sharing my screen to show the hospital records. Unless Virionics has developed teleportation technology, it's physically impossible for me to have reviewed and approved those assessments. And these risk warnings, these are your actual evaluations. Everyone, dated, time-stamped, with original metadata intact. The silence stretched like a tightening wire. Ms. Monroe, their CFO finally spoke. Do you understand what you're alleging? This could void the entire merger agreement. We're talking about potential fraud, regulatory violations, possible criminal charges. I kept my voice steady. I understand completely. That's why I've maintained comprehensive documentation. I have a fiduciary duty to ensure accurate compliance reporting. I cannot and will not certify false documents, regardless of whose signature appears on them. Another pause. Paper shuffling. Whispered conferences on muted lines. We'll need all your documentation, the attorney said. Everything. And Ms. Monroe, you should probably retain personal counsel. Already done. After the call ended, I sat in the humming quiet of my office. Somewhere above me, in the executive floors, phones were starting to ring. Emergency meetings were being called. Panic was spreading like fire through dried paper. By 4:15 p.m., I received an email from our chief legal officer. Tara, please prepare all merger-related compliance documents for immediate review. Do not discuss this matter with anyone. Too late. Houston already had everything. The match was lit. The fuse was burning, and I was safely outside the blast radius, watching the spark race toward $90 million worth of dynamite. I pulled out my encrypted USB drive, checked it one more time. Everything backed up, everything secure, evidence of months of fraud, stored safely beyond their reach. The quiet fire had started. Now all I had to do was wait for the explosion. The boardroom erupted at exactly 9:07 a.m. on August 7th. I know because I could hear the shouting from the 15th floor. The summons came 20 minutes later. Not an email, not a phone call. Security appeared at my office door. Ms. Monroe, you're needed in the executive conference room, immediately. I gathered my laptop, my notepad, and most importantly, my USB drive. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt like ascending to Judgment Day. Security flanked me like I might bolt. They didn't understand I'd been waiting for this moment for months. The conference room was a war zone. CEO Harrison Clark sat at the head of the table, face the color of expensive bourbon. Chief Legal Officer Margaret Way had documents spread across the table like tarot cards predicting disaster. Miles Randall sat hunched in a corner. His usual swagger evaporated. The Houston team filled one side of the table via video screen, their faces granite. Sit, Clark commanded. I sat. Houston is threatening to terminate the merger, he began. voice dangerously quiet. They're also threatening to sue us for $90 million in damages. They claim we submitted fraudulent compliance documents with your signature. I opened my laptop without speaking, connected to the presentation system with practiced calm. The first slide appeared. Compliance documentation analysis authorized, unauthorized signatures. What is this? Clark demanded. Evidence, I said, clicking to the next slide. Side-by-side comparisons, real assessments versus forgeries, my actual warnings versus the sanitized lies. Every document Houston received was forged using my stolen credentials, while I was either provably elsewhere or, in one case, under general anesthesia. The room erupted again. Clark slammed his hand on the table. Margaret Way was already on her phone with outside counsel, but I kept clicking through slides, access logs, email chains, the IT ticket where Miles requested my password, timestamps showing 3 a.m. forgeries, hospital records. You're suggesting someone in this company committed fraud? Clark's question came out like a threat. I'm not suggesting anything, I replied, clicking to a slide showing Miles's Slack messages. I'm documenting what happened. Someone used my credentials to sign off on a merger that violates 47 different compliance standards. Someone turned my risk assessments into endorsements. Someone exposed this company to criminal liability. Miles shot to his feet. This is ridiculous. I demand. Sit down, Randall. Margaret Way cut him off, her phone still pressed to her ear. Don't say another word without counsel present. I clicked to the next slide. The forged signature on the final merger approval. The one blessing catastrophic security vulnerabilities. The one that would have made me personally liable when patient data was inevitably breached. Ms. Monroe, Houston's lead attorney, spoke from the screen. To be clear, you never approved these integration plans. Never. Every authentic assessment I wrote recommended stopping the merger until critical issues were resolved. Someone else decided those warnings were inconvenient. Someone, Clark repeated, staring at Miles. The CFO burst through the door. Houston's threatening to go public. Stock's already down 12% on rumors. We need... He stopped. Seeing the presentation screen, his face went white. I clicked through more evidence. The parallel Slack channel, the 2 sets of books, real compliance reports, and the fiction submitted to Houston, the pattern of late-night forgeries, the systematic erasure of my warnings. How long have you known about this? Margaret Way asked. I've been documenting irregularities since January, I said. The forgery started in May. I discovered the identity theft in July. I reported it to Houston's audit team on August 3rd. You went to Houston before coming to us. Clark's voice could have frozen helium. I met his glare steadily. I responded to a direct request from their audit team for documentation I allegedly submitted. I had a legal obligation to clarify that the documents bearing my signature were fraudulent. Failing to do so would have made me complicit in fraud. The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and Margaret Way's muffled legal consultation. Finally, Houston's CFO spoke. We're willing to discuss remediation, but only if Virionics conducts a full investigation and provides complete transparency. Any attempt to cover this up, and we'll pursue maximum damages. Agreed, Margaret said before Clark could speak. She looked at Miles. Mr. Randall, you're suspended immediately pending investigation. Security will escort you out. Miles's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. Security moved toward him. Tara, he said desperately, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them... I've told them everything, I said quietly. Every document, every forgery, every crime. As security let him out, Clark turned to me. We'll need your full cooperation in the investigation. I closed my laptop, stood, and pulled a sealed envelope from my bag. My resignation, effective immediately. My attorney will coordinate with your legal team on the investigation. The room exploded again, but I was already walking toward the door. USB drive in my pocket. 13 years of loyalty finally burned to ash. Behind me, $90 million was circling the drain, and I was the one who'd pulled the plug. Ms. Monroe, please reconsider. Clark's voice followed me to the door. We need you to help fix this. I paused, hand on the doorknob. You needed me to prevent this. That time has passed. Name your price, he said desperately. Salary increase, senior VP position, stock options. We'll make this right. I turned back one final time. The room looked like a funeral where everyone just discovered they were next. Margaret Way was fielding calls from what sounded like the SEC. The Houston team had disconnected, probably to call their litigation department. The CFO was watching stock prices plummet in real time on his phone. You want to make it right, I asked. Start by explaining to the FBI why someone thought forging federal compliance documents was a good business strategy. I'm sure they'll find it fascinating. I left my resignation letter on the table, one clean sheet of paper in an ocean of evidence. 2 sentences, no explanations, no accusations, just done. The elevator ride down felt different this time. Lighter. Like shedding armor I'd worn so long I'd forgotten its weight. 13 years of protecting a company that threw me away for a coffee machine and a beach vacation. 13 years of building walls they'd tried to tear down with my own signature. Security waited in the lobby, probably to escort me out. I handed over my badge, my parking pass, my company laptop, kept walking when they asked me to wait for HR to process my exit. Outside, Denver's August sun felt like freedom. I sat in my car for a moment, watching through the glass doors as chaos bloomed inside. People running between floors, executives being called from lunch. The beautiful panic of consequences arriving all at once. My phone buzzed. 17 missed calls, 43 texts, the first from Bethany in HR. Tara, we need to discuss your resignation. The December compensation decision has been reconsidered. December. When they'd smiled and told me sacrifices had to be made, when they'd bought Italian coffee machines while denying my bonus, when they'd started the chain of events that led to this moment. I deleted the message unread and drove away. 3 weeks later, the news broke. Virionyx Labs under federal investigation for merger fraud. The stock dropped 37% in one day. Miles Randall arrested on charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Harrison Clark stepping down to focus on the legal matter, the Houston merger dead, along with $90 million in expected revenue. I read about it from a beach in Costa Rica. Laptop closed, phone on silent. My lawyer handled everything: the FBI interviews, the SEC depositions, the grand jury testimony, all conducted via video link because I'd kept my promise to myself. One-way ticket, no return date, no forwarding address. The USB drive with all the evidence turned over to federal investigators. Along with 2 backup copies, they had everything they needed. 47 gigabytes of proof that sometimes the most dangerous person in a company isn't the whistleblower who speaks up. It's the compliance officer who stays quiet, documents everything, and waits for the perfect moment to let the truth detonate. They'd thought they could erase me, use me, make me disappear into routine audits and forgotten contributions. They forgot that in compliance, we're trained to see patterns, to spot risks, to prevent disasters. They just never imagined they were the disaster I was documenting. My resignation letter had been simple. Effective immediately, I resign from Virionyx Labs. My attorney will be in contact regarding the federal investigation. But if I could write it again, sitting here with salt air and sunshine, watching the news of their collapse from 1,000 miles away, I'd add one more line. P.S. How's that Italian coffee taste now? Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of corporate justice resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more stories of workplace revenge and share your own thoughts about standing up against corporate corruption. Have you ever documented injustice in your workplace? Let me know in the comments.